Attention, Marianne. You and I were talking about our guest
Yes.
yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, and today we welcome John O'Rourke, author of the Jersey Shore thriller Killer. John, good morning to you, first of all.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. John, I have to tell you, people who write about thrill killers are not our typical guests.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Of just a plain, ordinary guy, right? In Family Man, or am I thinking of somebody else?
No, he was not a family man. This is Richard Biegenwald was a man who had problems from a very early age. Grew up in Staten Island, and at the age of 18, he committed his first killing, and he got a life sentence with the possibility of parole. So
did he live with his mother?
He lived with his mother.
That's
yes.
the one. Okay,
Yep.
So I got it mixed up.
He
I know
did.
who you're
He
talking
lived with
about.
his mother
Yes.
for a period of time in Staten Island. Absolutely.
Now, you refer to him as the Jersey Shore thrill killer. Staten Island and New Jersey are not the same place, obviously. How does it go from one to the other?
Well, when he was 18 years old, he committed his first murder in Bayonne. A man named Stephen Slodowski. He shot and killed him. He went, got a life sentence, went to Trenton State, did a number of years in prison, got out in around 1975. He then moved to the Jersey Shore area during that period of time, and that's when he started doing his serial killings. He was coined the thrill killer by the Monmouth County prosecutor at the time, a man named Alexander Lair, who came up with that nickname for him, because he killed a number of female victims for the thrill of it.
Okay, that was what I was going to. You answered my next question was, there's really no motive. This is just somebody who had pleasure out of killing women. Did the women he killed have a particular profile?
It's interesting that you asked that. Yes, they did. They had a similar look. They were all young teenagers, ranging anywhere between 18 and 20 years old. They had they were brunettes, dark hair, dark eyes, all attractive women, and that seemed to be what gave him the thrill, those type of women. Interestingly, his girlfriend had a similar looks to his thrill killing victims. So I through my research, I found that interesting, that he would pick someone that looked very familiar to the victims he actually went out there. And
so I'm confused about one thing. You mentioned a girlfriend. Was she ultimately killed as well?
No, she was not. Believe it or not, he was married at the time to his wife, Diane, and he had a girlfriend at the same time, and they were all living together in an apartment in Asbury Park. But no, she was not killed. She eventually broke away from Richard Biegenwald because of she was having some drug issues. That's why she was in that environment.
That was my next question. Did he have drug issues?
He had a number of issues. Yes, he was known to use drugs. I think he primarily used the drugs as a introduction to his victims. I think that's where for the most part, the drugs came in for him with his wife and his girlfriend. That was their attraction to him, is that he was a supplier of the drugs for them.
Now, did he just go and find anybody on a particular day, or was he following these women around and decided to commit these murders?
Well, according to the police interviews of Teresa Smith, who was the girlfriend who finally came forward as the state's key witness, she said that he would experience periods, almost like a woman would experience periods of PMS. He would be irritable, hard to get along with, and then he would leave, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. And it's during that period of time when he would seek his thrill killings, because that's what relieved his tension. So he was known to roam the Asbury Park boardwalk, where he picked up Anna Osowitz, which was the first victim that actually made the I guess it was the domino effect for him. That was a cold case that caused Teresa Smith to come forward, because she had knowledge of his involvement in that killing. And so he was roaming the boardwalk there, and he picked up a couple hitchhiking as well. So he was in and around the Jersey Shore area looking for his victims.
I just want to tell the audience that they're listening to News Talk Radio, WOBM, AM 1160 and 1310. And with us today is John E. O'Rourke, author of The Jersey Shore Thrill Killer. We're speaking about Richard Biegenwald. Marianne, I want to tell you, totally off topic here. I was listening to you and Bob driving in today. You could hear work from outside.
You can.
You can.
Okay.
Did you hear in the studio?
No.
They're working on the first floor.
Really?
Construction. I was able to hear.
And you were able to hear? I can't hear it from here.
I did.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe it has to do with the sound, picking up sounds that you can't hear.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe you're hearing it from inside there, from the studio.
No idea.
No? Because we can't hear it from here. And the reason the door's cropped open is because they've been working on the furnace. Close that door and you're going to schwitz.
Okay, getting back to the Jersey Shore Thrill Killer by John O'Rourke. John, did he have a definite... We know that he had psychiatric issues, but what was the diagnosis, if there was one?
He was diagnosed as a kid as having schizophrenia. However, there is no information whatsoever that he was ever under serious medical, what's the word I'm looking for?
Treatment.
Thank you. Treatment, and or was ever issued any medication for that diagnosis. When he was in prison, there is also no indications that he was under doctor supervision. So, although he at a young age he was diagnosed as that, I'm not exactly sure that was his problem. He also was diagnosed with antisocial, having an antisocial disorder.
Question for you. I'm sitting here looking at you, and you're not somebody who only writes books. What else is it that you do in life?
Well, I'm a former New Jersey State Trooper. I did 26 years with
How did I guess? I should have said that first.
Yeah, I did 26 years with that organization I'm proud to say I was a part of. Now I'm a security consultant, and I'm head of security at a high-end golf club in Montclair. It's called Montclair Golf Club, but it's in West Orange, New Jersey.
Interesting. What drove you to write this? Why did you take such interest in this story? Because as a state trooper, there are a lot of stories that you could tell that have gone on in the state of New Jersey. What was it about Richard Biegenwald that fascinated you to the point of writing this book? I love this book for a few reasons. First of all, I don't like books that are 600 pages long. And you get to the point very quickly. I love people that could tell a story in half the time as others, and that's the nature of this book. What drove you to write it?
Well, you know what? It was a genesis. It started from my first two books, which I never really planned on being an author. I just wanted to pay tribute to the Jersey troopers who died in the line of duty, and that was the basis of my first two books. And I wanted to parlay that writing into nonfiction, but in a historical sense. And I have a friend of mine who is a publisher, and he said to me, he says, you can't do that. And I said, well, why? He says, because you've cracked that niche. You've got in there, you've gotten books published in a true crime purview. You need to stay in there until you get established. So it really set me back, because I didn't really at the time didn't have the desire to write about true crime. It took me 1 year of research to kind of figure out what I was going to write about, who I was going to write about. And in my research, I knew I wanted to write something about a serial killer. And when I started digging into all the books about serial killers, I kept on coming across the name Richard Biegenwald. Sometimes it would just mention his name, sometimes a sentence or two, other times a page or two dedicated to him. When I looked into him, there was never anything of substance written about him and his victims. So I said, that's the case I'm going to write about.
Now, this isn't something that went on in the 1800s. This is really within our lifetime. And my question to you is, who did you find that was still alive that was able to help you put this book together?
That's a good question, and I was
All
very.
my questions are good.
I was. That is true. I was very fortunate to interview the prosecutor who prosecuted Richard Biegenwald. Through him, he introduced me to Richard Biegenwald's defense attorney, a man named Lou Diamond, who was very helpful and very gracious. Actually, he invited me to his home and spoke at length about the person that he defended. I interviewed the investigators involved from both the prosecutor's office and the local police, all of which who had some dealings, from the crime scene investigator, Kevin Quinn, to the lead investigator, Billy Lucia, on this case. And Mike Dowling, who's actually the one who helped crack the cold case with Anna's body being discovered.
Now, did Lou Diamond, the criminal attorney that helped this very sick man, what did he have to say about him? I mean, Richard Biegenwald was eventually put to death, am I right?
No.
He wasn't.
No. And that's interesting. And Lou Diamond is
I'll tell you why I made that mistake, and I'm going to give away this kind of surprise. Forgive me for interrupting you. Yesterday, Marianne, can I tell you the story, Marianne?
Yeah, but I told you it wasn't.
No.
Well, okay, go ahead. Yes.
Marianne hears of your book, and hears of Richard Biegenwald, and she said, that man murdered my cousin at the age of 13, 15.
Well, she wasn't. She was kidnapped.
She was
missing,
kidnapped?
and they never realized. But it turned out it wasn't Richard Biegenwald.
Who was it?
It was Robert Zirinsky.
Oh, it was right. We talked about it.
Right. So it was about the same time, and he did not admit to the killing or even the kidnapping. He said he accidentally killed her and then buried her body. How do you accidentally kill someone and then accidentally bury their body? But he did not actually come forward with that, and he was not found guilty. This was 1969, and it wasn't until, I believe, 1980-something that he was actually in jail.
Well, an amazing story in itself. Richard Biegenwald, how long was he sentenced for?
Well, his first killing, he got a life sentence with the possibility of parole, and he went into prison in 59, came out in 75. Then he got the death penalty with his trial with the serial killings. However, through the appeals, it was eventually overturned, and he got a life sentence.
And I should say not Richard, Robert. I said Richard. It's Robert Zirinsky.
So to answer your question about Lou Diamond, he's a very interesting person, extremely knowledgeable, very talented attorney, and he was, the bulk of what we know about Richard Biegenwald that's in this book comes from him, and he is very frank about saying his job was not to get him found not guilty. That was impossible. His job was to get Richard Biegenwald a life sentence and not the death penalty. That was his job. Ultimately, that's exactly what ended up happening, because they eventually won the appeals, and he got life in prison instead of the death penalty.
I guess, the next question is this. Did Lou Diamond think he was a despicable character? I mean, here it is. You have a murderer, and I always wonder, how does a criminal attorney defend despicable people? It kind of blows my mind that
I've always thought about that.
It just, where do they...
Well, they have the right to representation.
I think of
they have to give them the best they can.
The O.J. Simpson,
Well, they got paid a lot of money for that.
I understand, but is somebody with integrity going to do anything for money? Don't answer that, Marianne, because I know I know her too well. But seriously, did he have any bad feelings about himself for defending somebody that was clearly very horrible human being?
I never asked him that. He did tell me that. Of course, he thought he was a despicable man. That goes without saying. He knows that he was a problem. But there was also, and he also is frank about saying that he was a serial killer, but he just wasn't born a serial killer. And if you read the book, and my research has shown that he was problematic from nearly when he started to walk, he was showing signs that this is a problem child.
It's the story of Richard Biegenwald, once again written by John O'Rourke. And how... Go for it, Marianne.
How can you go to Barnes & Noble? Is it on Amazon?
Yes, Barnes & Noble stores in New Jersey will have it. Your
Okay.
local bookstores should have it. Amazon.com will have it. Barnes & Noble online will have it.
Okay.
And you could always check out my website as well, which will link you to where you can purchase it.
Last question. Do you still carry around those cards so that we can get out of tickets on the turnpike?
Nice.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
He's talking about the PBA cards.
I know what he's talking about, but I don't know what he's talking about.
All right, John O'Rourke, thank you once again for being here, and look forward to more books. And once again, kudos to you for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you guys
today.
very much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. We'll be back with more Preferred Company after these words.